The moment Mark said, "Let's pivot to a value-driven synergy here," I swear I felt my left eye twitch hard enough to reboot a router. It wasn't just the phrase, though if corporate jargon could be weaponized, that one would be a war crime. It was the fact that he said it to the VP of procurement for our biggest client, a woman known for sniffing out buzzwords and roasting them alive. She blinked once, tilted her head, and asked, "What exactly does that mean, Mark?" And like a deer running straight into traffic, he kept talking. 15 minutes later, after blaming procurement for bottlenecks, misquoting renewal terms, and promising a discount we hadn't approved, he signed off the Zoom with a thumbs-up emoji and declared, "Handled." He spun in his chair, smirking like he'd just solved global peace through PowerPoint. Then he left. No follow-up, no recap email, just vanished into the executive lounge like a kid who broke a lamp and hoped mom wouldn't notice. I spent the next 4 hours salvaging the relationship, calling the client, clarifying terms, rebuilding trust one spreadsheet at a time. By the time I sent the final follow-up, it was 8:00 p.m. My laptop fan was whining, and I was one coffee away from a cardiac event. Then my phone buzzed, an email from the client's VP herself. Subject line, "Thank you." Inside, one line, "Appreciate you, Rachel. You're the reason we're staying." Yeah, I read it 3 times. It's the kind of message that doesn't change your title or your pay, but it keeps you alive in a place that forgets people like you exist. You do the work, fix the fires, and sometimes, just sometimes, someone notices. The next morning, I forwarded the email to my direct manager, just for visibility. Not Mark's dad, the CFO, but my actual boss. No reply. Typical. Around here, silence meant good job, and sound meant prepare to suffer. And sure enough, at 11:14 a.m., Mark slacked me a waving emoji and wrote, "Can you pop into Dad's office?" I took a breath, grabbed my notebook, and walked into the CFO's office. The man sat behind his desk like someone had personally offended his Harvard diploma. Mark was slouched on the side chair, looking wounded, his go-to pose whenever he'd screwed up. "Rachel," the CFO said without looking up, "we need to talk about how you handled that client call." "I handled it," I said evenly, "by making sure we didn't lose a $9 million renewal." That got his attention. His head lifted, eyes cold. "You embarrassed my son in front of a major client." Ah, there it was. Not a performance review. Damage control for baby boy's ego. "You undermined his authority," he continued, voice tightening. "Now there's chatter about who's really leading the account. Chatter. Code for the client trusts you more than him, and we can't have that. So here's what's going to happen," he said, fingers steepled like a courtroom villain. "At Friday's all hands, you'll issue a public apology to Mark for overstepping." Mark perked up like a puppy waiting for a treat. "It doesn't have to be dramatic," the CFO added. "Just acknowledge that you were wrong to speak out of turn." I could have argued. I could have explained the entire sequence, defended my work, called HR, hell, even looped in legal. But I didn't. I just nodded. "Okay." The CFO blinked, clearly expecting a fight. "That'll be all," he said finally. I stood, smiled, and walked out. Calm, polite, because while they were playing ego chess, I'd already moved my queen 6 months ago. By the time I reached my desk, HR was standing outside my office door. Clipboard, compliance binder, the whole friendly ambush kit. Behind them? The CFO again. His face was that specific shade of red reserved for middle-aged men who confuse authority with respect. He slammed a printed email on my desk. It was the thank you message from the client. "You think this is appropriate?" he barked. I glanced down. "It's an email I received. I didn't write it." "You know what I mean," he snapped. "You made my son look incompetent." I kept my voice flat. I clarified the correct terms after Mark misquoted pricing. That's not undermining. That's saving the account. He didn't like that. His jaw clenched. Mark feels humiliated, he said. I wanted to say he doesn't need my help with that, but I didn't. I just smiled thinly. So, I said, you brought HR to manage your son's feelings? His face twitched. HR jumped in, clearly rehearsed. We're requiring that you issue a public apology during Friday's all hands. We can help with wording. I leaned back, calm, detached. You want me to apologize for preventing a $9 million loss? The CFO didn't answer. HR tried to hold eye contact and failed. Okay, I said finally. One word, surgical. They looked relieved. Good, the CFO said. We'll add you to the agenda. And as they left, I smiled again, because they had no idea the game had already ended 6 months ago. They thought I was backing down, but in reality, I was already 3 steps ahead. I didn't breathe a word, didn't let my face show anything but calm obedience, because the second you let arrogance see that you're angry, it wins. Instead, I turned to my second monitor, opened a folder buried so deep even E.T. would have missed it in an audit. The folder's name was harmless. Continuity Agreement, Client Vantage 1. Inside it sat 6 subfolders, the kind of files only someone who'd lived through contract wars would bother to archive. One of them was labeled Executed Clauses, Verified. Another, Executive Addendum. See, what Mark and his dad never noticed, too busy flexing titles and LinkedIn buzzwords, was that 6 months earlier, during a quiet contract renewal, I'd inserted a single clause. Simple, boring on the surface, camouflaged under legal language about operational continuity. But it was razor sharp underneath. It designated me, Rachel Monroe, as the named executive for continuity purposes, which meant that according to the client's policy, any major change in leadership required my sign-off. Not Mark's, not the CFO's, mine. I clicked it open. The PDF stared back, signed, sealed, and time-stamped by legal, countersigned by the client's counsel. Perfect. I reread it, line by line, just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. The signatures were clear, black ink and blue initials on page 9. That small, invisible bit of ink was now worth $63 million. They wanted a public apology. I'd give them something better, a public collapse. That night, I didn't rage or cry. I didn't even call anyone. I went to my favorite Thai takeout spot, the one with the sticky floors and fluorescent lights, and ordered my usual, pad ki mao, extra chili. Spite tastes better with heat. Then I sat at my kitchen table, the cheap LED overhead flickering like it was narrating my thoughts, and opened my laptop again. Inside another innocuous folder, titled Q2 Vantage Ops Agenda, sat the contract backup. Clause 4.2, buried in Section 4. The exact line read, all active service continuity shall remain contingent upon oversight by the named executive signatory. Any alteration of said designation requires client notification and written reauthorization. Underneath that clause was my signature, clear as day, and beneath mine, the client's. Their timestamp was 2 hours later than mine. Legal had processed everything. Back then, I hadn't meant it as revenge. It was self-preservation, a safeguard after watching too many projects implode under mismanagement. But now it was gravity, unstoppable, unblinking gravity. At 10:43 p.m., I composed a new email to legal@lancercorp.com, client legal@vantage1.com. CC. My personal Gmail, CC. Because I'm not stupid. Subject. Continuity Clause, Section 4.2. Body. Per the attached agreement, I remain the named executive for continuity under the Vantage 1 contract. Any change to this designation may trigger Section 6.1a regarding service termination rights. Please advise on required protocol following voluntary separation. I attached the signed clause, time-stamped, verified, and then added one more file. My resignation letter. Short, calm, surgical. 2 paragraphs. No anger, no drama. Just a date, a signature, and finality. I didn't print it. I wanted it digital, immutable, and in their system, forever. I hit send. The email left my outbox at 10:41 p.m. I stared at the screen for a long minute, feeling the quiet hum of consequence stretch through the room. Then I closed the laptop, took a sip of bourbon, and whispered to the empty kitchen. Checkmate. The next morning, the all-hands meeting was labeled Quarterly Alignment and Culture Refresh, which, in corporate translation, could mean free pastries or a mass firing. It was held in the 3rd-floor glass conference room, half sunlight, half performance stage. I arrived 5 minutes early because if they were going to humiliate me publicly, I wanted front-row seats to their own downfall. The room filled fast. Project managers, analysts, even HR, pretending this wasn't theater. Mark sat in the front, new haircut, smug expression. A logoed polo stretched across his chest like an ego badge. He was whispering to 2 other junior execs, his new little entourage, who chuckled every time they looked at me. At 10:02 a.m., the CFO strutted in, voice booming with that fake confidence men get when they're about to do something stupid in a suit. He clapped his hands and started his sermon. "We've had some internal miscommunications lately," he said, "and I want to talk about respect, collaboration, and staying in our lanes." If hypocrisy had a sound, it would have been his voice. He continued, "To that end, there's been a leadership change with our Vantage One account. Effective immediately, Rachel Monroe is being removed as point of contact. Mark will assume full leadership going forward." No applause, just the soft shuffle of chairs and one awkward cough. I stood up, smooth and steady. "Understood," I said. "Thank you for the update." Then I smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't hide the fact you've already won. There was a beat of silence after I spoke, like the entire room was holding its breath, waiting for a reaction that never came. The CFO looked smug. Mark looked proud in that clueless, pre-celebration kind of way, and everyone else looked awkward, because even the interns knew something about this didn't feel right. I walked back to my seat, folded my hands, and stared out the window, calm as a surgeon after the incision. That calmness was what scared them most. People expect tears, anger, excuses, but quiet? Quiet means you know something they don't. The meeting stumbled forward, everyone pretending to focus while sneaking glances my way. Mark sat back in his chair, the grin of a man who thought titles equaled talent. "You'll assist with the transition this week," the CFO added. I nodded, just once. Of course. Translation. Over my dead inbox. An hour later, the room cleared out. Conversations about alignment drifted into whispers about what just happened, but I didn't linger. I gathered my things, my badge, and the little cactus that had survived 3 reorgs and 1 coffee spill, and walked out. By the time the CFO made his next office round, my desk was empty. Chair pushed in, monitors gone. On the center of the desk, I left 3 things: my access badge, my office key, and a white envelope with his name on it. No drama, no speech, just absence. Mark arrived 15 minutes late, iced latte in hand, and stopped dead in front of the empty workspace. The grin vanished. He scanned the room, half confused, half panicked. People noticed. A few whispered. One intern took a photo. Then the messages started. At 9:11 a.m., Mark. Ready to apologize now? No punctuation, no awareness. I didn't respond. At that exact moment, I was 3 miles away, sitting in a retro diner with red vinyl booths and a smell that permanently embedded itself in your clothes. My laptop was open, coffee refilled twice, and the screen showed one tab: Outlook, Sent folder. The message with the clause and resignation was sitting there, time-stamped, read receipt confirmed. A quiet little digital bomb with a fuse they hadn't noticed yet. It's a strange peace that comes when you've already pulled the trigger. You don't wait for justice anymore. You wait for gravity. Back at the office, the CFO found the envelope on my desk and took it straight to his office. 10 minutes later, he came out pale, tight-lipped, and silent. He told HR to process it quietly and informed the leadership team that I'd made my choice. "No drama," he said. "Let's move forward." Corporate translation: pretend the body isn't still warm. By noon, Mark had locked himself in a glass-walled meeting room, pacing circles like a man suddenly realizing he'd been driving without brakes. I imagined the moment he started Googling phrases like continuity clause named executive meaning. Because that's what he was doing. I knew it. He'd find nothing helpful. That clause wasn't standard. I'd written it in collaboration with legal and the client's procurement counsel 6 months ago. A surgical stitch invisible to the untrained eye. At 2:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Jenna in marketing. "Hey, just saw HR's announcement. Did you quit? Darren's acting weird. CFO looks sick." I typed back. "All good. Just stepping back. Not a lie, just incomplete truth." Because what no one in that building realized, not the CFO, not Mark, not the entire HR compliance committee, was that by removing me from the account, they had violated the continuity clause. And once that clause broke, the client had every legal right to terminate the contract without penalty. $63 million. Gone. At 9:07 the next morning, the first spark hit the powder. The client's procurement head, Monica Lane, sent an email to our ops team. Subject line: new point of contact? Short, cold. Surgical. Noticed Rachel Monroe is no longer assigned to the Vantage One account. Please confirm who our new continuity contact is for this renewal cycle. Need confirmation for internal compliance. Just 4 sentences, but it was the corporate equivalent of pulling a fire alarm. At 9:22, someone from operations, Steve, bless his clueless optimism, replied cheerfully. "Hi, Monica. Thanks for checking in. Mark will now be handling all continuity matters. Looping him in here." He CC'd Mark 5 minutes later. At 9:38, Monica replied, "That won't work. Per agreement, continuity must be managed by the named executive signatory. Mark is not listed. Please advise." Those 4 words, "Mark is not listed," were the crack of thunder before the storm. By 9:45, Steve was panicking in legal's Slack channel. "Hey, quick question. Continuity clause for Vantage One. Does it have to be Rachel?" No answer. So he walked to legal's office himself. At 10:06, James Weller, our lead counsel, came sprinting down the hallway with a printed contract in hand. Tie loose, face pale, shouting into his phone, "Where's the CFO?" He didn't knock. He barged into the office, dropped the papers on the desk, and pointed. "You remember this clause?" The CFO blinked. "What clause?" Weller jabbed the page. Clause 4.2. Continuity designation. Rachel Monroe is the only authorized executive. You removed her. They can walk. The CFO stared down at the contract like it was written in another language. His lips moved silently, reading the same line over and over again. Continuity contingent upon named executive designation. His face drained of color. "But she resigned," he said finally, weakly, like the words themselves could undo what was already in motion. Weller's voice was sharp. "No, she didn't. You removed her publicly during the all-hands before the resignation was even processed. That means the clause was violated the moment you reassigned the account. You broke continuity." "I thought it was symbolic," the CFO muttered. "It wasn't symbolic," Weller snapped. "It was structural. You just kicked the foundation out from under a $63 million renewal." At that exact moment, Mark was sitting in his glass office across the hall, frozen in front of his monitor, rereading an email from Monica Lane. Her tone had gone from professional to surgical. Pending clarification of the continuity clause and authorized signatory, we are placing all renewal activity on hold. Please refrain from further correspondence until our legal team completes review. Corporate translation: we're done here. By 10:41 a.m., the email had spread like wildfire through every executive inbox. Urgent subject lines stacked like dominoes. Slack channels pinged nonstop. HR pretended to be investigating. Legal was in full panic mode, and the CFO was pacing his office, muttering, "They wouldn't actually walk. They wouldn't." But they could. And they were already halfway out the door. By 11:12, Weller was briefing the CFO again, slower this time, as if explaining basic math to a toddler. You removed the named executive tied to the contract. That automatically voids service continuity, which means Vantage One can legally terminate without penalty. We can't enforce renewal. Not at all. The CFO looked up, eyes wide. Then we'll call Monica. They're not taking calls, Weller said. Then email her. We already did. Send Mark. Weller's voice dropped. With all due respect, sir, Mark doesn't have signature authority. He's not on the contract. And he hesitated. We can't find him. What do you mean you can't find him? The CFO barked. He left earlier. Phone's off. Slack's dead. No one's seen him since the last email chain went nuclear. By 1:00 p.m., the board had been notified. It wasn't a meeting. It was a fire alarm. 7 faces appeared in the emergency Zoom call. 6 seasoned board members and 1 terrified CFO, trying to spin this into a minor misunderstanding. He blamed me first, then legal, then communication gaps. But one of the board members, a former litigation shark from Boston named Ellen Price, cut through the noise. Let me get this straight, she said, voice cold as marble. You removed the only contracted executive tied to our largest client account publicly, on record, without reviewing the service continuity clause, and now the client has legal grounds to walk. Silence. Yes, Weller said finally. That's correct. Then it's not a misunderstanding, she said. It's negligence. Someone else, finance maybe, spoke up. Can we bring Rachel back? Just temporarily? Weller shook his head. She hasn't responded to internal emails or calls. Her resignation is filed and time-stamped, and she included the clause reference in her exit note. All signatures are intact. Her paperwork's perfect, watertight. She planned this, Ellen murmured. She saw it coming. The CFO tried to defend himself. She said, "Okay, E." She agreed to apologize. That wasn't agreement, Weller said quietly. That was setup. She gave you the rope. You built the gallows. By 3:00 p.m., panic had settled into the building like a gas leak. Silent, invisible, suffocating. Emails came in from the client's procurement division, each colder than the last. One message from Monica's assistant read simply, "Please confirm transition details. Pending non-compliance, Vantage One will be reviewing alternative vendor options." Translation: We're already shopping for your replacement. Meanwhile, I was sitting in my diner booth, same corner seat, same chipped coffee mug, laptop closed. I'd already seen the emails. Monica had forwarded the first one to my personal inbox with no message, just a subject line. You still watching? I smiled, stirred my coffee, and watched the rain streak the window. This wasn't revenge. It was equilibrium. They wanted to weaponize protocol against me. Instead, I made protocol their executioner. By 8:46 the next morning, another message detonated in every C-suite inbox. Subject: Leadership call request. Urgent. From Monica Lane. To Legal, CFO, COO, Contracts, Risk, Counsel. We are open to a leadership call to discuss continuity, but we will not engage with anyone reporting through the CFO's chain of command. If this cannot be accommodated, we will begin external transition. By 9:01 a.m., the CFO's office went silent. He sat staring at his monitor, pale and sweating, while outside his door, people whispered like mourners outside a hospital room. The CFO sat motionless, staring at Monica's email like it might rearrange itself into mercy. The room felt smaller by the second. Behind the glass walls, staff passed quietly, whispering, glancing toward his office like they were watching a live autopsy. The blinds stayed half shut, but everyone could feel it, the tension, the hum of impending collapse. He finally picked up the phone, dialed legal, then hung up before it rang. There was nothing left to spin. Across the hall, the COO stood at her doorway, watching. When their eyes met, she closed her laptop mid-sentence, mumbled something about a previous engagement, and left. Corporate translation. I'm not going down with this ship. At 9:13, legal tried to salvage it. They emailed Monica back, suggesting a few neutral members of leadership to represent the company on the call. HR, risk, maybe the COO. It was the kind of desperate maneuver that said, "We're out of moves, please pretend this is fine." By 9:28, Monica replied, "Appreciate the effort. We prefer to speak with someone who previously held direct account authority and has executed contract-level decisions with us. Until then, we are halting all new work orders. If Rachel Monroe becomes available, we are open to resuming discussions. Otherwise, we'll begin onboarding alternate vendors." That single paragraph hit like a controlled detonation. Not loud, just final. At 9:31, the CFO's inbox exploded. Board members, legal, finance, operations. The word urgent lost all meaning. One message from Ellen Price read simply, "Schedule a call, now." He didn't. Instead, he shut his door, lowered his blinds, and sat there, staring at the carpet. Mark still hadn't shown up. His office sat dark, his jacket slung over the chair, his half-finished oat latte melting into a sad puddle on the desk. Rumor had it he'd called in sick. More likely, hiding. By 10:07, Weller from legal came storming down the hallway again, hair disheveled, shirt half untucked. He looked like a man who'd aged 10 years overnight. He didn't bother knocking. He slammed through the CFO's door, papers clutched in his hand. "Sir, tell me you didn't," Weller said, breathless. The CFO looked up, blank. "Didn't what?" Weller dropped the file on the desk like evidence in a murder trial. Clause 4.2, Continuity Designation. Signed, time-stamped, legally binding. You removed Rachel publicly during an all-hands before her resignation processed. That means you triggered the breach. She said she was leaving anyway, the CFO argued, voice cracking. "No," Weller said, voice rising. "She said, okay." That wasn't agreement. That was a setup. She gave you the rope, and you built the gallows. The CFO's face turned the color of printer paper. His hand trembled as he reached for the file, scanning the highlighted lines like maybe the ink would change if he stared long enough. It didn't. The signatures were still there. Rachel Monroe, legal counsel, client legal, all airtight. "They can't just walk," he whispered. "They can," Weller said, "and they will. They're already drafting the exit letter. No penalties, no delay. You gave them the right to leave." Outside, a phone rang twice before someone picked up. Then came the sound of a file cabinet slamming shut, a sharp, metallic finality that echoed through the hall like a verdict. At 10:25, the CFO finally spoke, quieter now. "Can we call her? Maybe she'd—" "She's not answering," Weller said. "She hasn't since last night. She forwarded everything through official channels. It's done." In the background, you could hear keyboards clicking faster, Slack pings stacking, the building's pulse quickening. Someone from finance muttered, 63 million. Another whispered, how the hell do we report this? The CFO slumped back in his chair, shoulders caving inward. On his desk sat 2 documents, the contract with the clause and Rachel's resignation letter. Crisp, clean, final. Next to them, a single uncapped pen lay on its side, ink smudged on the page like a fingerprint of inevitability. He stared at it for a long time, his hand hovering but never touching. Because deep down, he already knew Rachel wasn't coming back. She didn't need to. The paper had already spoken. 3 miles away, I sat in the same diner booth, coffee half drunk, the morning sun reflecting off the chrome trim of the window. My phone buzzed. Monica again. They're spiraling. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. My silence was louder than any statement I could make, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. They tried to bury me under policy and power, and all I did was hand them a shovel. By noon, the corporate atmosphere had curdled into quiet panic. People didn't speak above a whisper. The executive floor smelled like burnt coffee and fear. The kind of fear that travels through HVAC vents and seeps into every cubicle. On Slack, the hashtag leadership channel was locked. On Outlook, urgent. Board directive kept appearing, then vanishing as quickly as it arrived. At 12:17 p.m., Ellen Price, the board's litigation shark, fired off an email to the entire C-suite. Effective immediately, all communications with Vantage One will be handled by legal. The board will conduct an internal review of leadership actions pertaining to the continuity clause breach. Please provide all documentation by 2:00 p.m. In corporate terms, that was a guillotine politely asking for paperwork. At 12:39, Weller walked into the CFO's office for the 3rd time that day, his patience stripped raw. He didn't sit. They've halted every pending work order, he said. Procurement, logistics, renewals, everything. They're walking, legally clean. No damages, no penalties, nothing. The CFO stared through him, the way people stare at a wreck they caused but can't comprehend. We'll fix it, he murmured, as if repetition could undo gravity. Weller exhaled slowly. Sir, this isn't a fender bender. You detonated our biggest client, and you did it on camera, in a meeting, with 30 witnesses. Across the floor, staff were pretending to work. Monitors glowed, but no one was typing. Someone from HR whispered, The CFO's son hasn't logged in all day. Someone else replied, he turned off comments on LinkedIn. Meanwhile, legal's printer was screaming. Dozens of pages pouring out, contracts, clauses, chain of command charts, all with one name circled over and over again, Rachel Monroe. At 1:12, the board convened over video. The CFO sat under fluorescent lights, skin gray, tie crooked, eyes red-rimmed. Ellen spoke first. Walk me through exactly how this happened, he stammered. There was miscommunication. No, Ellen said. There was ego. He tried again, mumbling about protocol, about oversight, about HR procedures. Ellen raised a hand. Save it. You publicly reassigned a contractually bound executive without reviewing the agreement. That's not miscommunication. That's negligence. The COO, who'd returned long enough to witness the fallout, cleared her throat. They're asking for Rachel back. The client's position is clear. They'll resume discussions only if she's reinstated or consulted. And has she responded? Ellen asked. Weller shook his head. She's ghosted the company, but she's still in contact with the client, informally. The CFO looked up sharply. She's talking to them? Not officially, Weller said. Monica's forwarded her updates on clause interpretation. She's not engaging, just observing. Ellen leaned forward. Then she's smarter than all of you combined. No one spoke. By 2:00 p.m., The CFO's office was stripped of its confidence veneer. Calls went unanswered. His son's office door stayed locked. The board's auditors arrived quietly, armed with flash drives and legal pads. People avoided eye contact in the hallways. Even the cleaning crew moved faster, as if afraid to breathe the same air. At 3:27 p.m., Monica's final message arrived. "We've decided to transition our account externally. We appreciate the years of partnership and wish your team well. No emojis, no signature line, just closure." By 3:30, the CFO's phone began buzzing nonstop. Unknown numbers, investors, internal auditors. He didn't pick up. He sat there, motionless, staring at the resignation letter still on his desk. Rachel's name printed cleanly above the signature line. Below it, the ink smudge where his pen had once rested. He whispered, almost to himself. She said, "Okay." "Yeah," Weller muttered from the doorway. "She did, and you should have known better." That night, the board convened one final emergency session. The decision was unanimous. The CFO would transition out effective immediately, citing personal reasons. The announcement went public at 7:03 p.m. Internal memo, short and sterile. After years of dedicated service, CFO David Sloan has decided to pursue new opportunities. We thank him for his contributions. Corporate obituary language. No mention of Mark. No farewell party. Across town, I was sitting on my apartment balcony, laptop open, the city humming below. My inbox pinged. A new message from legal. Subject: availability for discussion. Time sensitive. The body was long, polite, desperate. They wanted to explore a temporary consultancy engagement to maintain client trust. Translation: please come back long enough to stop the bleeding. I didn't reply. I closed my laptop, took a sip of bourbon, and watched the city lights flicker. Sometimes silence is the loudest clause in the room. Because this was never about vengeance. It was about gravity. And when arrogance climbs too high, gravity always wins. The next morning, the office released its press statement. One of those emotionless paragraphs drafted by PR at 2 a.m. that reads like it was written by a sleep-deprived AI. Lancer Corp remains committed to excellence and transparency as we navigate leadership transitions. Translation: we're bleeding money, but please don't panic. I read it over coffee in my kitchen, the same chipped mug I'd had since my first internship. The one that said "World's Okayest Analyst." I almost laughed. 12 years of late nights, invisible fixes, and quiet competence boiled down to a footnote under leadership transitions. But I didn't feel bitter anymore. Just clean, detached, like I'd finally stepped out of the noise and realized how loud it had been. My phone buzzed. A text from Monica Lane. Client vote unanimous. Renewal approved. With new terms. Thanks for setting the standard. I smiled, small and private. Monica didn't need to say more. Vantage One had kept the clause structure intact, naming their own continuity executive this time. They'd learned from me. Proof that the best revenge isn't destruction. It's replication. I opened my email next. Dozens of unread messages, subject lines like "We miss you in ops" and "Can we talk, Rachel?" Some from former co-workers, a few from recruiters who'd clearly seen the headlines. One, from the COO, simply said, "Board is open to consulting arrangement, whatever terms you want." I deleted it without opening, because the truth was, I didn't want back in. That company wasn't a home anymore. It was a warning label. Around noon, I walked down to the diner. Same red vinyl booth, same waitress who refilled your coffee without asking. She grinned when she saw me. "Back again, hun? You must really like the chili fries." I smiled. "I like watching gravity work." She blinked, laughed, and topped off my cup. Across the counter, a young woman in a Lancer Corp badge was staring down at her laptop, face pale, phone buzzing every minute. Probably some new recruit stuck cleaning up the mess. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. But then she looked up, caught my eye, and I saw it. The exhaustion. The quiet intelligence. The same spark I used to carry before I learned what it cost. She smiled nervously. I nodded once. That was enough. There'd always be another her, another me, another office with glass walls and soft betrayal. I left a tip big enough to make the waitress blink again and stepped outside. The city felt different, still humming but lighter somehow. Maybe because, for once, I wasn't chasing someone else's approval. I'd written my own ending. As I walked, I thought about that clause. The one I'd drafted at 1:42 a.m. 6 months earlier. Eyes burning, typing like a ghost in an empty office. It wasn't about revenge then. It was about control. About never again being at the mercy of someone else's incompetence disguised as authority. Most people think power comes from shouting the loudest, but I'd learned it comes from the fine print. The quiet line no one bothers to read until it's already too late. That night, as the sun fell over the skyline, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. Rachel Monroe? A voice asked. Professional. Calm. This is Ellen Price. I no longer represent Lancer Corp. I'm advising a new firm, Meridian Capital. We'd like to discuss a director role. Flexible terms, full autonomy, client oversight authority included. Interested? I smiled, letting the moment breathe. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. Send the details, I said. After the call, I set the phone down and looked out the window. Neon reflections shimmered off passing cars. Somewhere downtown, the CFO was probably cleaning out his office under supervision. Somewhere else, Mark was rewriting his LinkedIn summary, pretending this hadn't happened. Me? I poured another drink. Not out of spite, out of satisfaction. Because silence, signed in ink, had done what shouting never could. And that's the thing about legal clauses. They don't scream. They wait, and when the moment comes, they speak louder than anyone in the room.